We are back with another episode of Chef's Kiss. Today's show, though, is going to kick ass because we got Jake Butt. I'm sure it's probably the first time he has heard that comedy in his entire life. 2016 first team All-American Ozzie Newsome and John Mackey award winner, former Broncos tight end Jake Butt. Jake, what's going on, man?
Actually, I've heard about every joke in the book at this point. Believe it or not, I don't think I've actually heard the kick-ass pun yet. So
what?
Yeah. Well, usually I'm on network TV, so they can't say it. Mm-hmm. This is a little more laid back. I like it, though.
I imagine growing up, though.
If you didn't mention it.
I imagine growing up, you're hearing that all the time. You've had to hear every iteration of it.
Everything, man. The worst really even was just in first grade when, everything mattered to you in elementary school and it's roll call. And I knew whenever they were going to say my full name, the whole class was going to erupt in laughter. But, hey, forged by fire, man. That was kind of the start of it. I was going to prove some people wrong.
Absolutely, dude. I know we just met, but do you have a nice butt?
I don't. My fiance does, though. So she's
fair enough.
She's marrying into the name.
Fair enough. All right, Jake. So we want to ask you a couple questions here. Obviously, NFL draft just finished recently. I want to talk about your draft experience because it was so unique. You obviously suffered a torn ACL in the Orange Bowl in your final college game, which affected your draft stock. Tell me what that process was like. What did your agents tell you? What were you telling teams? And what were your expectations during that whole process?
I wasn't telling teams anything crazy. Like, I was telling them the truth, that I was on schedule, was a successful surgery, don't expect any long-term hindrances from the injury. And a lot of teams were telling me, coming up, like, hey, listen, you're going to be good. One that stands out is the Steelers' Mike Tomlin pre-draft meeting. There was a number of other teams that spent those meetings, watching film and questioning, hey, what did you see here? What went wrong here? What went right here? But Tomlin, they sat me down. They're like, hey, man, we watch your film. We know who you are as a football player. We want to see if you fit our culture. And here's the thing, man. You're going to be okay. You're a hell of a player. Like, we just want you to know that, you're going to overcome this and have a successful career. So that always stood out. Draft weekend, challenging, man. My agents, I knew I wasn't going to go first round. I thought maybe I could go third round, but it was a deep tight end class that year. So day one comes and goes, then it's day two, rounds 2 and 3. I didn't get drafted then. And then it started day 3, which started with round 4. I was like Mel Kiper's #1 player available, so I thought I was going to get drafted early. And I'm not. They're rattling pick after pick. I remember, it became a big social media thing where Darren Ravel was tweeting out, the finance guy, every pick that I was not being drafted, I was getting X amount of dollars that I was going to claim with my loss of value insurance. Wasn't 100% accurate, but
what a dickhead to do that too.
Hey,
like, dude, you got nothing else? But is that the subject matter you really got to pick? Yeah.
I get it, man. Now that I'm in sports media, I get it. It is what it is. Like, it's not his fault. It's not my fault. It just is what it is. It's interesting for football fans to see that part of it, But once I got drafted, it was all behind me, So it just kind of magnified the moment, the pressure. My name was getting circled around a little bit more because I was supposed to go blank earlier in the round. So, finally got drafted to John Elway and the Denver Broncos, and all was right after that. I could just kind of focus on my career.
Yeah. And now I read an article, Jake, that it was very important to you to tell your story about this. I don't know if it was Sports Illustrated or somebody. They said, if you want to be on a podcast or you want to write an article, please reach out to me so I can give you my side of the story. What is so important to you about this, or why is that important to you kind of control that story?
Because people were using me getting injured in that bowl game and saying, hey, like, look, this is why you shouldn't play in the bowl game, right? And then there were some people that took my quote because I said I wouldn't change anything. I don't regret it. And people are saying, hey, look, this is why, these guys are frauds for not playing, or why everyone should play. And my whole point is I lived through it. So I have the perspective, because I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. What happened to me, it really highlights the truth and the reality of the process. And it's important for me to paint the full picture for people, why I decided to play and why some players will decide to play, and what's the cost if you do get injured, because I got to see that, and how can you recoup that cost? Because some guys have insurance, they get injured, they slip. the insurance is a whole different beast. So I just like to tell the story from my point of view with the whole picture and help people understand that this is a very complex decision and there's more than one right answer, and it depends on the individual and their situation.
Yeah, fans, people see that dollar amount, Jake, and they think that's all going to you, right? And I saw you say it breaks down to my agent, to the fees, to the dues. They see the number and they say, oh, he's getting all that. But in reality, you broke it down really well to where that money is going once that hits your checkbook, you know?
Yeah, so that was a hot topic because I rounded up. Instead of saying 44.3%, I said 50%, right? And some CPAs were on me like, dude, listen, this is Instagram. This is not, not the IRS, bro. Like, it's just easier to say 50%. So, I wanted to break that down for fans. And, you see the contract value. You see, guys signing these big numbers. But in the NFL, it's not guaranteed. I think only quarterbacks lately have had fully guaranteed contracts outside of a franchise tag. So if you see a guy say he's going to get $100 million bucks, first off, he's not even getting the $100 million. He's only going to see $70 million. Then he gets taxed. Your agent gets paid 3%. You have union dues. The point in highlighting that is not to say, oh, feel bad for the NFL player. The point is to say, mainly to my colleagues, hey, guys, like, be very wise with your money, because unless there's a handful of guys that make it to their second contract, and if you're a first rounder, you're not retiring off it. It's a great, great jump start. I couldn't retire if I wanted to right now. I didn't make enough money. So that's the point in highlighting that.
Well, that's what it stands for, right? Not for long. That's what they always say about the NFL. I wanted to ask you, is there a discussion between teammates in regards to playing in the bowl games or not, and how are you portrayed in the locker room with those decisions? Is there kind of like a split for players? Granted, if you're a senior or if you're kind of going to go first round, like, what is the discussion between teammates in that locker room?
Yeah, so I can only speak on my experience, and the topic has changed greatly, but so is the landscape, right? Even asking this question when I was going through it, it was still a little taboo, right? Like, Jalen Smith got injured the year before, and then when we were getting ready for the bowl game, Leonard Fournette made the announcement he was sitting out, and then Christian McCaffrey sat out. And I remember some of my teammates asking me if I was going to sit out, and man, I was voted captain of my team, and it was a big game, a chance to go out on a high note. I was always going to, it wasn't even a question in my mind. But I'd imagine these days the conversation has changed, and the big part of this is I'm excited to see the expanded playoff, because I think if you're playing for a national championship, guys aren't going to sit out, right? That's the trend that we've seen lately. But if a guy does sit out, I think most players understand the cost, and it's hard to knock somebody, right? There will always be some people that have a hard stance and say you can never sit out. There'll be some people that say chase your bag. I think most people are understanding of both decisions, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of understand. Some people have families they are thinking about that they need to take care of. Maybe they don't have, the means to kind of just wait and see. So yeah, absolutely can kind of see both sides on that. So obviously you were coached by Jim Harbaugh. I want to know what Jim Harbaugh's like. What's he like on the field versus off the field? Because he seems like kind of like a relatable, goofy, kind of like a weird uncle kind of vibe. Like, is that how he is off the field or what?
He's the same. The Jim Harbaugh you see is the Jim Harbaugh you get in all situations. Like, that's what I respect about him. He is Jim Harbaugh. There's no act. There's no show. There's no mask for the media. Who he is when he's answering questions pregame is the same as postgame, is the same in meetings with us, is the same on the practice field. It's the same if we see him in passing down the hallway. Now, of course, his level of joy and excitement sways based on, whether or not the team's playing well and winning and what he feels about the season. That dictates it. But Jim Harbaugh, what you see is what you get. And I think I can definitely appreciate that. That's the case for most coaches, but it's not always the case, especially a big personality. Sometimes, there's coaches and people that like to project the big personality to the media. Jim, what you see is what you get.
And Jake, you talked about a quote or a lesson that you learned from Jake Harbaugh, and it was, don't sacrifice what you want in the long run for what you want right now. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote, that saying, that mantra. I was curious to, what was the situation that surrounded that was going on? Was that just like during camps, or kind of what was the context behind that?
Yeah, it was a phrase he repeated a number of times, and it started with we had 4-hour spring ball practices. Like literally, the NCAA says you were allowed to be in the building for 4 hours, and most teams would break that down for an hour and a half of meetings and 2.5 hours of practice. Jim said, "Hey, we don't need to meet. I want to see what we were 5-7 the year before. He's like, I want to see you guys practice." So at the hour 3 mark, he'd blow the whistle, and everyone would come up, and that's where it first came up: is don't sacrifice what you want most right now, which is a break, and which is for us to take it easy on you and to be comfortable. If you want to win, you want to make it to the NFL. Understand that's where you're going. Don't give that up just because of your desire to be comfortable right now. And it applies to that. It applies to conditioning. It applies to life. It applies to a lot of things.
Yeah. And on those teams, Jake, Jabril Peppers, Frank Clark, Chase Winovich, you play with some dudes, right? So what I wanted to get, I love like stories like this. So did anybody stand out to you as like the hardest worker in the room? I always want to know, like, first guy in, last guy to leave. Some of those guys are just grinders. You got any of those guys that you played with?
Yeah, all those guys you just mentioned. I mean, for the most part, we had a hard working team. Like, guys embraced the work. We would, if someone wanted to come throw passes and do 7-on-7, it wasn't just a handful of guys. It'd be the whole damn team there. The D line, everybody was there. So we had a hard working, dedicated, committed team. Chase Winovich is a name that stands out. Like, almost had a screw loose in the way he approached the game of football. I hated blocking him because you knew he was going to go 100%, to the point where it's like, dude, you almost got to chill out a little bit. Yeah. But Chase didn't care because that's who he is. He's working pass rush moves, walking around on campus. So he was always a guy that I think if you asked anybody, his name would pop up as a dude that was going to give 100% in 100% of the things he does.
Yeah. Now, as a former tight end, your words do hold some meaning. So I wanted to ask you, if you had free reign and you're building a football team, what tight end do you need on your team that is currently playing? And I'm going to go ahead and say Travis Kelce is not in the conversation, because that's probably tight end one. It's probably just an easy out. So minus Travis Kelce, you're building a team. Who do you need as your tight end?
Yeah, I mean, so Kelce, I think it depends. I think Kelce works great in Kansas City. And I think George Kittle works great in San Francisco. Think about those two offenses and how different they are. Kelce would still be a great tight end in San Francisco, and Shanahan would find a way to feed him. Kittle would be a great tight end in Kansas City, and Andy Reid would find a way. But think about the difference in systems, how Kelce is not known as a bruising blocker, and they do some very creative things with him to make sure he's not asked to do the same role as George Kittle. Whereas George Kittle, they're running outside zone, and he's an extension of the offensive line and ground and pound, right? So I think it depends on the system. George Kittle would be one of those names. I think Mark Andrews is a phenomenal tight end, unbelievably athletic, catches everything. He can mix it up and block as well. He's great after the catch. Kyle Pitts, I'd love to see him in a system that actually has any function of an NFL offense. He's got that level of potential. Darren Waller, I think in New York this year is going to be something really interesting. Freak of nature athlete. So I think he might have that, a big breakout year back to what we saw a couple years ago, right? And then you got guys like TJ Hawkinson. I'm trying to make sure I don't leave anyone off here.
You're naming all the guys who won the same awards that you did. You know that, right?
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah, TJ. I think one that's a sleeper that I'm going to pick is Sam Laporta. I think Laporta for Detroit is going to end up catching 40 balls a year here and really be a pivotal point of that offense. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I'm definitely forgetting some names, so sorry if I'm forgetting them, but those are the names that kind of pop into my head right away.
All right, nice. No, that's good. I wanted to see, obviously you mentioned earlier going against Chase Winovich was very hard, but yeah, toughest to block in your career?
Yeah, it would probably be Chris Wormley or Frank Clark. Those two stood out. Frank was extremely explosive and had a rock solid head, and it would hurt to block him. Whereas Chris Wormley, if you just look at the way he's built, long arms, like built to play football, long limbs, big ass, big legs, dense, So like you'd hit him and he just wouldn't go anywhere. Like he was just like trying to move a cinder block. He could hold down his gap really, really well. So Joey Bosa, in terms of guys I played at Ohio State, he was really damn good, and we had to respect him.
Absolutely. Obviously, yeah, with that rivalry there too. Now you are transitioning and you are pivoting. You're doing some content on your social media. You got like a nicely highly produced content. It's looking good. You're broadcasting as well. So you have a new budding career in broadcasting. I wanted to know your goals, because obviously as an athlete, it's important to set goals, long-term, short-term. What are your goals with broadcasting?
Yeah, goals are, it started as, hey, let me just see what this career is about. And I loved it last year, especially calling games. Like being in the booth to call a game is as close to playing a game as I could possibly get. So first year went well, called games on Saturdays, did studio for Big Ten Network during the week, and did some bi-weekly studio covering the national landscape for a network called Stadium. So the goal is to continue to grow and call bigger and bigger games. The guys that I look up to and that do it as well as anybody, especially at the college level, are the names Kirk Herbstreit and Joel Klatt. Those guys are the absolute standard in terms of covering the game of college football. So I would like to continue to learn, build my knowledge of these teams, relationships with the coaches, and call bigger and bigger games, man. Just being in that atmosphere it's intoxicating. It's addicting. It's an awesome time.
Because you were apprehensive about it. You said you didn't want to get into it. You're like, nah, it's not for me. The spring game is what changed it, right? You went in and said, I forgot who it was that you said. We said, just give it a chance. Just go ahead and do it. Did you fall in love with it there? Or were you more so like, hey, you got that reception, like, hey, Jake, if you want to do this, man, like you have a future in it?
Yeah, so Big Ten asked me to call. They like to have alumni and people with ties to the program call the spring game. So Big Ten asked me to call the Michigan spring game, and I told them no, because I was like, I don't want to get into media. About 3 weeks before the game, I just kind of had this thought. I was walking with my fiance, and we were talking about it, and I realized that there's value in doing something and finding out you don't like it. So I'm like, how can I ever know whether I like it or not unless I give it a shot? Called them. Thankfully, they didn't have anyone calling the spring game, so I said, cool, I'm in. I called them up. They said, yep, you're in. Call the spring game. Prepared as if it was a game, had my charts, had my notes, called it as if it was a game, and got that feeling, man, the butterflies pre-game, that true flow state where I'm focused completely on the game. I love the mental aspect of it. As I'm watching the game unfold, I got to think of something to say that applies to the broadcast, that I can pull from my research. So that was very similar to the preparation. Then after the game, the producer called me and said, hey, I know you're unsure if you want to do this as a career, but, that went pretty well. I think you could do this as a career, make a living. Maybe you should consider it. And from there, it started the conversations, and, we were able to work out a deal to do that last fall. And it's just kind of accelerated from there.
Yeah, well, you have my vote. I've seen the games that you've called, so they're very well. Last question I had some people that wanted me to ask you this question. Now, obviously, you're a lot thinner than you are in the NFL, right? We've seen Joe Thomas. He's really trimmed down. Jeff Saturday. So transitioning from the NFL to your next point in life, or after the NFL, does that weight just fall off, or are you trying so hard to maintain that weight in the NFL? Are you changing your diet? That drastic change, how is that happening?
I think for most guys, rarely do you see someone stay the same. It goes in either direction.
Yeah.
Some guys just fully stop working out and still eat the way that they ate when they were playing, and it could go either way. For me, I've always been about 250 pounds since my freshman year at Michigan. So I kind of stayed like that. I think the highest I got up to was like 256, 257. And I realized, one, I exercise for my mental health. I do not feel good unless I'm doing some type of exercise. So I still lift. I train basically very similar today as to when I was playing. Like I still train. And I've just reduced some of my calories. Like, man, I was drinking 1,000-calorie shakes a couple times a day when I was playing. Get rid of those, and now I'm weighing like 240, 242. So I've lost 10 pounds. Nothing drastic like Joe Thomas, but it can certainly go either direction.
Yeah, you got to fit in those suits now for network television. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
can't have that beer belly. That's all I got for you, Jake. Again, I appreciate it. Just let everybody know where we can find you. What you got coming up? I know we talked about some broadcasting stuff. I know you were working with what was it, USFL?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. USFL, I'm finishing out the regular season with them. I got a game this weekend, and then I'm off one weekend, then 2 more on the 17th and the 18th. But I'm back with the Big Ten Network this fall. Week 2, I'm calling Michigan Bowling Green, or maybe that's week 3, and then I'm calling an Ohio State game. So you can see me on Saturdays if your team's playing on Big Ten Network. Chances are that I'm calling that. And social media, Jake Butt. You see it down here in the bottom of the screen. I interact, man. I'm active on there, so anyone can DM me questions, ask me things, comment, advice, feedback, whatever. I appreciate it, and I interact with everyone. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Djibouti, thank you again for stopping by. I'm going to go ahead and stop this and then just stick around. Guys, we'll be back next week again with another episode. Appreciate it. Thank you.